Hello, my name is Mindy Nuring. I'm the Executive Director at River Grand Senior Living in Grand Rapids. Today I'm here to interview Dr. Bruce Thomas, District 318 Superintendent, and Pat Medure, District 318 School Board Member, regarding the overcrowding in our elementary schools here in District 318. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Dr. Thomas, can you start out briefly by telling everyone what the issue is?
Over the past 4.5 years, and Mr. Medure can speak to it better than I, but over the past 4.5 years, the school district has been looking at the conditions of the facilities within the district. They've had outside experts, to use that term, to provide some insight as to the condition of the existing facilities in the district, along with the ongoing concern that the district has had with increased enrollment. Over the past 10 years in the school district, you have had an increase in your elementary enrollment of approximately 26%. To provide a little additional clarification of that, in the last 3 or 4 years, what you've done is to go from half-day kindergarten to all-day kindergarten. That then has provided some stressors as far as space. So in other words, when you had a half-day kindergarten, you used one room in the morning, and then that same room was used in the afternoon for a different group of students. As a result of that increased enrollment, what you have moved then the fifth grade out of the elementary schools into the middle school. So you did some accommodation as far as space already, but what we now have is lack of space in the elementary buildings, and that's evidenced by just walking through the building, and you can see instruction taking place in hallways, instruction taking place under a stairwell, for example, at Forest Lake, and also in entryways and the like. So what we now have are concerns regarding space, the ability to accommodate students on a daily basis, and just this past year, for example, that enrollment has moved through the elementary schools into the middle school. And you've now added 6 additional classrooms to the middle school. That was planned if, in fact, you had an increase in enrollment to accommodate those students. That's taken place. But now that bulge, if you will, is also moving to the senior high school. So this past spring, we made the decision to move an early Invest Early program out of that, early success program rather, out of the high school and into portables. And the portables are now housed at Southwest Elementary. The core facilities in the school district aren't large enough to accommodate additional portables at the sites. So in the spring of this past year, the board had a decision to make as to whether or not it was to remodel facilities or to build new facilities. And when we were to take a look at the remodeling process, it didn't meet the needs of the school district, and the board voted to move forward in asking the community to build 2 new facilities and close the 4 existing buildings.
One question I had too is you decided on building 2 new elementary schools, and you did research into that too.
Correct. When we look at the school district, we currently have 4 elementary buildings. And from a cost analysis perspective, we were better off moving to 2 larger buildings on different sides of the community in the site acquisition. We can talk about that a little bit later if you'd like. But when we look at the proposed elementary buildings, we're talking 900 students per building. That then provides us with, from a teaching and learning perspective, the ability to use the teaching tools that we have today that we didn't have before in addressing the needs of kids in cooperative groups, small learning groups, and the like. And for us then to differentiate that instruction, we believe that a K-5 building, moving the 5th graders out of the middle school back into the elementary school, which then increases the size, student enrollment of our elementary schools, makes sense to us. Some of the dialogue has come up, why wouldn't you have 1 building? Well, we would not want to have 1 elementary school with 1,700 students at one particular site. So the board came to the conclusion that 2 elementary schools would be in the best interest of the district and the children we serve.
And they had kind of polled the community too, and the community had also decided on 2
Pat,
schools.
you may want to speak to the meetings that you've had.
We've had a number of community meetings when this whole process started, from the study to right up to where we're at today in regards to our decision process. And we had taken community input on what the community would like to see have happen in regards to the school. And that's was really helped our decision process by listening to the community and what they wanted to have as far as elementary schools. So it brought us to the conclusion that it was 2 K-5s, kind of an east-west perspective, if you will. So, and community input was important to us, listening to the community and what they wanted to see for the future of 318.
Okay. So what is the cost to taxpayers for this?
When we look at the proposed buildings, we're talking 2 facilities, and specifically the analysis that we've done from 4 different construction firms provides a specific dollar amount for the size that we're talking about regarding the number of students, 900 students, and with the specifications by the Minnesota Department of Education. We would have 2 buildings that could accommodate 900 with approximately $38 million per building. And then you have site acquisition, some infrastructure costs, and so forth. So the cost to taxpayers, if we were to be successful on November 3, for an average home in the community, is my understanding, the average value is approximately $139,000 to $140,000. The cost for a home of $150,000 would be $8 per month. If we were to remodel the same facilities and then have, we would have the need then to submit a plan to the Department of Education, and we would have to have commissioner approval, which we've received for the 2 facilities that we're talking about. But if we were to have gone down the road of remodeling facilities, the estimated cost there would have been $51 million. That would then also equate to $8 per month for a home of $150,000. The same cost for new construction would be $8 a month for a home of $150,000. In other words, the same. However, the differentiation here is that the construction of new facilities, the bonding process would go over a period of 22 years. And if it were for a remodel, it would be over a period of 15 years. But again, if we were to look at new construction, we're looking at facilities that'll last 50 to 75 years versus ending up with a remodel. And then for us to then go through eminent domain and take out part of a neighborhood to allow us to do that construction, that would then last for 15 years, and we'd still have old facilities.
Okay. So why is now the right time to do this?
I think the right time right now is construction costs are going to go up as they have been. This is probably the lowest point that we're going to have or see where, as far as bonding monies, interest rates, and the like. The estimate that we have from our financial advisors, Elders and Associates, if we were to miss this opportunity and move into the next year, it's a given, according to forecasters, that interest rates are going to increase. The other part of it has to do with construction costs. Construction costs in this past year have gone up 12%. The estimated cost for this next year is up again around 8% is the projection. So if in fact we miss this date, then we are guaranteed that the costs of construction are going to increase, and also the costs for interest, borrowing, bonding, and the like will also increase.
And I would just add to that, that's kind of the business side of that piece on why we need to do it now. But we really need to sit down and take a look at where we're at with our student population within the elementary schools itself. As Dr. Thomas said, we had a 26% increase in enrollment in the past 10 years. So we're bulging at the seams in regards to the enrollment piece. So that's the other piece we can't lose sight of either. I know there's the financial piece, but the reality is that we need a place to put the children, and we're running out of space. We don't have that space now. So there's really 2 parts to it, the financial piece as well as the fact that our enrollment is up.
Right, and you touched on this, but why not just remodel?
Well, the remodel doesn't address the needs. As Pat said, if in fact we were to look at instructional processes and the like, we still have old buildings. the way we are engaged in the teaching and learning process today is different than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we would see that in a classroom of X number of students, you'd have rows of desks and a teacher standing in front of desks. We know today that the teaching and learning process is far more effective if we engage students in that learning process, and students working in small groups, differentiated learning styles. And the other piece is in 1955, we're in the area of Cohasset. The core part of that building was built in 1920. Today, we serve all children. And we have in our district of 4,000 students, 650 students are special education classification. So the schools that were designed in 1950 didn't meet the needs of the children that we have today. And I would equate that when we walk into a school and we see a professional sitting in the hallway with a child interacting as at Forest Lake yesterday and also at Murphy. And you can see that in the hallways we've got small desks, an adult sitting with a child, or in an entryway. If you were to go to the clinic, I'm making the assumption that you would not want to see the doctor out in the hallway. You'd want that in an appropriate space.
Right. So if the referendum doesn't pass on November 3rd, you'll remodel?
No. The core facilities won't allow for a remodel. We've looked at that. If we were to remodel the buildings, we're talking $51 million. That would also take a vote of the community to allow us to do that for a period of 15 years. Our best assumption of the needs that we have right now, the remodel won't solve our problems and won't serve our needs. So we would continue to have crowded facilities. We would continue to most likely add portables to some of the buildings, which then impacts those core facilities. What I'm talking about are cafeteria, gymnasium. But we may think in the broader community that we have a cafeteria, that we have a gymnasium, that we have a multi-purpose room. We don't have. So when you look at Murphy, you have one space that is used for multi-purpose. That same space is used for a cafeteria, and that same space is used for a gymnasium. So if we add more students to that, the space again is crowded, and we can visually see that even today.
Okay.
And I would just add to that, if we've had portables up at Forest Lake for a number of years now, and they're a temporary fix. They're not a permanent fix. And even if we had space, extra cafeteria space, extra gym space and all that, you still have a temporary fix in regards to adding portables. We just spent $500,000 down at Forest or Southwest to add on portables to accommodate some programming that came out of the high school. So when you sit down and look at that investment, it's really just a short-term investment. It's not a long-term solution.
Right. So what happens if it doesn't pass?
If it doesn't pass, I think and Pat can speak to what the board's decision will be, but let me speak specifically as to how that'll impact the school district financially, and also then from an instructional standpoint. From a financial standpoint, we will then, right now, our levy for the current upcoming year is going to be less than 1%. What we will do then next year, if this doesn't pass, is to increase the capital levy to address issues such as boilers, tuck pointing, doors, restrooms, and the like. So that probably would, that dollar figure, the best estimate that I have would be about $5 per month versus building new at $8 per month. So for us then to use capital dollars, that then goes directly back onto local taxpayers. From an instructional standpoint, we then have stressors. How in fact do we in classrooms, for example at Murphy, a year ago we talked about class size in kindergarten at 27. 27 in a kindergarten class is too high, too many kids. Now the building also, that space was designed for 20, 22 kids, 23 kids, not 27. Children today, we are addressing the needs of a different group of children than we were 50 years ago. So what we'll have is crowded facilities, and that then doesn't go away. As my point of the kindergarten group, that kindergarten group is going from kindergarten to first grade, to second grade, to third grade. So we now have all the way through then stressors from an instructional standpoint when we have high class size. In the high school, for example, class size in a Spanish 1 of 37 is too high. 3940 in a classroom for social studies is too high. So we have that issue of space throughout the organization, and it needs to be addressed.
And I would just add to that, when we started down this road looking at this process and dealing with our space issues, one of the number one priorities was class size reduction, part of this. So dealing with the space, and if we're serious about the reduction of class sizes, which we are, we as a board decided that we need the extra space to do that. So you ask the question, what happens if it doesn't pass? We have to come back to the drawing board and sit down on how we can accommodate reduce class sizes, whether it's portables through whatever means, but then there's a cost to that as well. Right. And I see that as just as a temporary fix. So we're really not solving the big problem that we have in regards to the aging facilities as well as the lack of space. To get to the point of class size reduction, we need to deal with our space and the aging facilities. So it's going to be a tough decision in what direction what opportunities and what avenues we have to try to accommodate that.
Right.
For the long haul.
I know a lot of people have asked about Riverview. So what about Riverview?
Well, Riverview, let's look at the school district over the past decade. You had a reduction in enrollment. Prior to that, when you had the school district with 5,000 students, it went down below 3,000, or below 4,000 rather. Now that's up to that 4,000, pushing that crunch space along with the all-day, everyday kindergarten. The board, when they closed Riverview, made the right decision. You didn't have the students. You didn't have the money to basically mothball facilities because the district was making significant cuts in instructional programs because of the loss of students, the reduction in students as a result of the transferring fact of reduction in aid, in other words, revenue. The other piece of it is, again, Riverview was built in 1935. It was a 4-story building. It wasn't handicapped accessible. It had issues dealing with asbestos, had issues dealing with your boilers and the like. And even today now, you couldn't build at the Riverview site if you wanted to because it's now in the flight plan. And that building would not be adequate or appropriate from 1935 to the year 2015.
And I would just add to that, not that I want to go down a different road here, but I think you got to give credit to the past boards looking at what they needed to do at that given point in time with the class size reduction. We are a handful of schools in the state of Minnesota that doesn't have an operating referendum. Grand Rapids is one of those handful of schools that doesn't have an operating referendum. So you got to give credit to the previous board of being very fiscally responsible and doing what they needed to do at that given point in time. We can all sit here today and look at hindsight and we could have, should have, but we didn't. But at the time, it was the best decision that they could have made for the financial stability of the school and the school district as a whole. So again, I applaud the previous board for making those decisions. As tough as they were back then in closing facilities, curriculum, laying off teachers, staff, whatever the case may be, it's unfortunate, but it needed to be done to keep the viability of our school district and financially sound as well.
Okay. If we do build these 2 new schools, does that mean a reduction in staff?
When we look at the schools, Pat alluded to the class size piece. If we have new schools, then we have more space. We can reduce the class size, which then allows us then to hire more staff, teachers, to provide instruction in a more appropriate setting. As far as 900 students at a site, we will have most likely the same number of staff, if not a few more. As far as some have asked me, well, I would assume that you're going to reduce the number of administrators. Well, if you have 900 students in a building and you have in excess of 100 staff members, you most likely are going to have a principal and an assistant principal. So there will be cost savings when we take a look at operational costs of going from 2 plants from 4 plants to 2, and also then we have new facilities. Then our ongoing annual capital expenditures for repair and replacement then go down. So from an efficiency standpoint, we'll be more efficient with 2 sites than we are with 4. But as far as the numbers of employees will not be reduced.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about this, but there will be a reduction in class size.
There will be a reduction in class size. And in fact, last year, the board made a conscious effort to reduce the class size in the high school, and we've added staff there. We can't add staff in the elementary buildings, again, because there isn't a place to put them. I think the other piece of it is that when we look at opportunities for programming, we now have the programming opportunities that are out there for early childhood. This past spring, the legislature allocated $250 million for additional programming opportunities for early childhood. We can't provide that because we don't have the facilities or space to access.
Okay. What will happen to the old schools?
I think the old schools, and that's a board decision, and Pat can speak to that better than I, but I think at this point the board has not had a dialogue about what are we going to do with the 4 buildings, and it's probably a bit premature. They've had dialogue regarding Murphy and Southwest, and for us to look at the opportunities to repurpose those facilities for programs such as early childhood education. Also the Invest Early. Right now, when we look at the Blandon Invest Early programs that are in our schools, in this community and other districts, we can accommodate approximately a bit less than 30% of the applicants. So when we look at the use of repurposing existing facilities, it would most likely be for programs within the community, community education programs, early childhood, and for us to pull programs from some of the sites that we're currently leasing space in. Okay?
And I would add, we had conversations with the city of Cohasset and city of Grand Rapids. Some point in time in the future, referendum passes, they might be interested in the property for housing stock, for new housing development. And the one thing you got to keep in mind, referendum passes in November, we're still going to need these schools for 2.5 years during the construction phase of the new elementaries. So these schools will still be functioning. And going back to the remodel question, not that I want to go back, but stop and think about if it was the remodeling piece, we still have to provide education to those students during the school year. To work around that gets to be more difficult as well in the big picture. So what we do know is that the schools referendum passes, we're still going to be using these schools for the next 2.5 years, and whatever dynamics change in that 2.5 years might give a different look on how the board looks at those facilities.
Okay. What about overcrowding at the middle school and high school?
When we look at the high school, this past spring, we made the decision to reassess the programming at the high school, and we moved the early success program out, which gave us 6 additional classrooms. So I think we've provided additional space at the high school. At the middle school, what you've done over the past 2 years is to add 6 classrooms. And then with this initiative that's being proposed, you would move the 5th grade out of the middle school into the elementary setting. In other words, move the middle school 5th graders into those 2 elementary schools. We believe from an educational perspective, from a parent perspective, that 5th graders are better suited in a setting with elementary children. That then provides additional space for the middle school. And right now, if you were to go into the middle school, you'll see that the middle school is full, even though we've added those 6 classrooms. So by moving the 5th grade out, that provides then space at the middle school.
And I would just add to that, as a board, we looked at it as a holistic approach of space in general, from elementary, even though the focus is on the elementaries, elementary to middle school to the high school, of trying to accommodate and getting enough space for class size reduction well into the future. So it just wasn't to focus on the elementary, even though that might seem that's where we're at today, because we're looking at trying to build the 2 elementaries, but it was to the middle school as well as the high school and trying to plan for the future way down the road is accommodating space in all three arenas.
Okay. Those are really all the questions that I have. Do you guys have any other comments?
Well, as a board member, I've been on 3 years at the end of this current year, and it's real simple for me in my mind is we're short of space, we're overcrowded, we have aging facilities. Those two equal opportunity for us. And it's not that the facilities themselves are in bad shape. And I think if you go and look at the schools, I think our maintenance people have done a great job as far as maintaining the schools. They look fairly well. But when you go look and see the students and see the overcrowding, and as Dr. Thomas said, programming going on in the hallway, technical computer pieces stuffed in closets that lead into staff bathrooms, and schools that were built back in the 20s and the 50s just don't accommodate our needs for today. So again, I think it's simple. It's overcrowding, age of facilities, create opportunities for our children into the future. And I think we need to be looking at it for the next 50, 60 years. And I think as a board, I think we've done that. And that's why we're trying to accommodate what we're trying to do here by getting the people to sit down and look at this and get this referendum passed on November 3rd.
Okay.
I'd just like to say we appreciate the opportunity to visit, and I would encourage in the democracy that we live in is that people in our community take advantage of your opportunity as a citizen to vote on November 3.
And you can also early vote. You can already go to the county courthouse and vote. All right.
County Courthouse, second floor, County Auditor's Office. Early voting started September 18th, and all you need is your photo ID.
All right.
Make that happen.
Okay. How about where can people go to get more information about this issue?
One of the things that you can do is to go to the school district's website, the facility tab on that, and it'll provide just in quotes, a ton of information that addresses the needs of facilities in the school district.
And I would also add, don't be afraid to give a call, district office, or call one of the board members or Dr. Thomas as well. To me, information is powerful, and we want to make sure that we're getting the right and the most accurate information out to get the people's questions answered.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.